Thanks, Ed. I have a teacher voice, but like most superpowers, it should never be overused. So I'm going to go with the microphone right now. Before we bring the poets on, I just wanted to alert everyone to creative writing at American River College. We teach 8 different courses, and they include fiction, poetry, nonfiction, screenwriting, magazine production, publishing. The American River Review is our award-winning magazine. We regularly beat Harvard when we compete. We also have the only academic press at a community college, Ad Lumen Press. Our alumni include the Smosh Brothers. Yes, they started here, yeah. And Anthony Swafford, who not only wrote Jarhead, but got to be portrayed in the cinema by Jake Gyllenhaal. Who knows, that could be you next. Many of our students have gone on to bachelor's, master's degrees in creative writing, also PhDs in English. So without further ado, I will get started on introducing these poets. I'll give you the bios first, and we'll just let them go in order. Gina Barnard's poems and essays have been published in Columbia Poetry Review, Verse Online, Laurel Review, New Madrid, Web del Sol Review of Books, Kartika Review, Asia Literary Review, Poetry International, and in Japanese translation in Poemaholic Cafe in Tsukuba, Japan, and elsewhere. She was born in Fusa, Tokyo, and she spent her early years in Japan and in the Sacramento Valley. She holds an MFA in poetry from San Diego State University, a BA in English creative writing from UC Davis, and she completed her first 2 years of her degree right here at American River College, where she's now assistant professor of English. Our second reader, Gloria Valle, is a graduate of CSU Sacramento. She graduated with her BA in English, minor in history, MA in literature. Her emphasis in education was largely multicultural literature. She has been teaching at the college level for over 5 years. She began at Sac State as an instructor and recently joined the Los Rios campuses, Folsom Lake and American River colleges as an adjunct in the fall of 2018. She does continue to teach for Sac State as well as both Los Rios colleges. Education has always been her passion, but writing and reading sparked that love. She was first published at 13 and continues to write today every chance she can. As a mother, a teacher, and Latina, her writing is largely influenced by her identity, experiences, and culture. At this point, I will turn it over to Gina Barnard.
All right. On. All right, good seeing everyone here. I just want to say thank you to the Creative Writing Department and the Center for Teaching and Learning, or Teaching, and American River College, so I'm really excited to be here. Okay, so I am going to start off actually with okay, thank you. All right, good. So Gloria and I actually decided to have our poems projected. Some people do this during poetry readings, but a lot of poets don't. I actually got the idea from my mentor at San Diego State, Ilya Kaminsky. So yeah, Ilya Kaminsky is a deaf poet, and he was my teacher at San Diego State, and he would hand out his poems, and you know, because he said, oh, you can't hear me, or you might not be able to hear my articulation, and so why don't you read it? But I thought, you know, that's really great for everybody. I'm a visual person too, so I like to see the poems. I don't do very well at poetry readings if I can't read the poem. So I'm gonna actually start off with a poem by someone else, and because the next poem I'm gonna read is inspired by this poem. And Mary Oliver, for those of you who don't know, she just passed away, and she was a very prolific poet. She's actually one of the most popular poets that people who don't necessarily read poetry read her. And so I actually, it came to her late. For a while, I didn't think her poems seemed experimental enough, or, because that's how I was when I was younger. I was trying to be so cool with my poems. But as I got older, I realized, she has a lot of truths in her poems, and now I know why, she's so popular. Okay. Wild Geese by Mary Oliver. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert, repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese, high in the clean blue air, are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over, announcing your place in the family of things. Okay, after Mary Oliver. And actually, just an intro. I wrote this, I shared this poem with students, not this semester, so maybe I'll bring it in this semester. A few of my students are here. And I had them write, just their first thoughts. And so I was writing with them. And so this is the poem that I wrote in class while I was with my students a couple semesters ago. After Mary Oliver. How many times have I told myself to be good? As good as fall persimmons ripening in cool air, their nutty flavor marking the passing of the sun. How many times have I doubted what I am made of, in essence? Now I know my core is solid, for how could I not be? By a miracle, I'm carrying a tiny human, what feels strange and natural. How many times have I wondered if the world would break when, simultaneously, good and bad things happen at once? A room full of students discussing a poem. In another room, people recovering from shotgun wounds, a truck rammed into flesh. How many times do we ask a question of ourselves? How rarely do we answer? Thank you. And actually, I was going to say that, I was pregnant at the time, so that change also changed my poems. And this is called An Answer. After my son was born and he was a newborn baby. An answer. How do you answer a baby's soft snoring? With a cup of tea, I carry him close to my body. This is dangerous. It is so quiet here, I can hear my heartbeat. It is only cliche because it repeats. The olive tree outside our window springs green with pleasure. He only roots for me sometimes. He has learned to gently push his baby tongue down and out of his baby mouth to practice being a boy. I rock him back and forth and wonder how the shapes we are change and shift. I've forgotten some things inside of me. Others have grown. Rock him back and forth, his soft snore. Here, the windows of the house do not face sunrise and sunset. It is only when I wait outside that I see the shifting light. I used to rock back and forth without a baby. Only a moment saves me. I'm just gonna write. So I thought I was gonna talk more in between each poem, but sometimes you just let the poem speak for themselves. But this poem, so I wrote this last night, okay? So I'm gonna get feedback on it right now in class, in this class, no. So you guys can tell me. And so here I am, I'm sure there's things I'm gonna cut out and revise, but I wanted to have something new. And I know Tracy, I was talking to Tracy Gordine, she's a professor here as well. And you know, you inspired me when you said you had a poetry reading and you just you just wrote new poems. And I thought, that's amazing, you know? So that inspired me. So, okay, I haven't cried yet, so that's a good sign. As long as I can talk, all right. Love letter to my students. And 2 of my students are here, thank you for coming. Why do you do this to me? Some people say they try not to bring work home, but I'm thinking of you. The thing is, I feel at home at work with you all. Every class is different, every student is different, but every time we meet, it feels good, you know, for the most part, right? I wasn't gonna put that in there, but I knew I was gonna say, yeah, okay, it's like I'm not trying to pretend here, but most of the time, okay. The goodness is there. I don't want to talk about being good again, but it's there. Because it's easy to despair daily. Read any headline. Though, as long as I keep meeting you in the classroom, we can go on. The world goes on, little by little, we are doing something. Little by little, you all share yourselves with me and each other. You're vulnerable with each other and authentic with each other. You help me be a better human too. I hope I give you as much energy as you give me. And as I compose this, I start to question these lines. These words, are they the best words in the best order? You know, I had heard that and I had to look up who said that. So, because one of my poetry professors, so it was Coleridge, but I never said, is it Coleridge or Coleridge? How you say it, because I spelled it wrong initially, but anyway, that's where that came from. But I think about the times I tell you, just dump it all on the page, free write, and get it all out there. When anyone questions if they're going the right way. You're always going the right way if you're taking a step, always. And we sometimes don't listen to our own advice. Remember Anne Lamott's shitty first drafts? No one told me about shitty first drafts in high school or college. I struggled with words. I hated writing. Now I hate it less, because now I know there's always time to revise. Let me stop being didactic. What I'm trying to say here is, you are precious beings, and if that sounds too precious, so be it. Because right now is not the time to measure preciousness. Now is not the time to parse our words. We all need an intellectual hug. We need to feel like we belong. We need to connect with one another and support one another. I see that we do this in my classroom, and it's because of you. Your willingness to proceed on this journey, to listen, to read, to write, to question, to be perfectly imperfect beings. Thank you so much. All right, and Gloria Va is coming up next, and oh, you know what? I forgot to read. You know what? I don't care about that poem. I'm gonna let you read. Okay, do we have enough time? I just want to make sure we have enough time for you. Okay. Okay, so I actually was going to read this poem first, but then I realized that this poem was so old, but I got it published in the Kartika Review, which is an Asian American poetry journal. And it's, the pacing feels weird to me. You know, I feel like it's more of a a poem that you can read it and it looks really cool, but when I read it, it feels a little bit stunted. So I might ad-lib it a little bit because it was bothering me when I was practicing reading it, and that's why I moved it to the end. But this was about my time when I was in Japan. I was teaching English, and I was born in Japan. I'm part Japanese, and so going back to me felt like, oh, this is gonna be a snap. This is gonna be easy. I'm Japanese. I know what. No, that's not how it works. As anyone knows, straddling two different cultures or whatever. So this is about that. Everything glows in Tsukuba, and that's the city that I was living in. Sakura blossoms lantern lit in spring, neon convenience signs, the inner glow of a woman's bathroom window. Who is she? I bicycle through the narrow street. Signs signal a language I do not fully read nor speak. Eat a rice ball with salty salmon bits inside. Wash it down with a glass jar of sake. Hope that tomorrow I'll learn one more word. At Kasumi, I buy octopus in bite-sized pieces. Celebrities scream words in punctuated colors as a man living in a bubble on the beach spears a baby octopus, purpled and heavy. Yatta! Sushi-grade tuna, lucent, teases me to poke its glimmer through cellophane, to become the oba-chan in Tampopo, squeezing fruit flesh throughout supermarkets. Short shelves, small carts, the clerks, robots, nod without meeting my eyes, recite over and over, "Irashaimase, irashaimase." I ride home, octopus vibrating in basket. I pedal quickly to power the bike light, whirring like hot cicadas. Between the street and houses, a drainage ditch. Water streams through leaves. I swerve too close. My tire catches the edge. The octopus flies, trailing ink into the dark air. Thank you. Go, Gloria.
Thank you. Thanks, Gina. Can everybody hear me good? So my first poem, and I tried to structure the poetry today so that it would flow pretty well. My first poem I wrote many years ago, and you'll notice from several of these poems I'm playing around with structure a little bit. Got a little creative and was like, I'm just gonna play with this and see how it looks on the page. The first one deals a lot with identity and just rebirth, starting over, kind of reborn. The title is Shattered. Out of the ashes, she rises, reborn. In order to become whole, she had to break first. She became her own sun, breaking through the shackles of death and despair. She rose. Behind her is darkness. There is a glimmer of light. Light eludes from glass remnants, scattered, stretching before her. She puts one foot in front of the other. Thank you. These next couple of poems were inspired a lot by this idea of being othered, which I placed this in this form because this one ends with of the other. So I thought that was kind of cool. So they deal with this idea of being othered, what that kind of feels like in terms of my experiences. And they were also inspired by a reading that I read long ago in college that I continue to teach today to my students, which is just a chapter from Gloria Va's How to Tame a Wild Tongue from her book Borderlands. One of the quotes that I pulled out that I felt really brought out the essence of these two poems, I have up here, and then I'm just going to read the two poems. So, quote from Manzodua's text, "I will no longer be made to feel ashamed of existing. I will have my voice. I will overcome the tradition of silence. And so like I said, this first one, and both of them deal with this concept of being other, kind of straddling different identities and cultures, and trying to find a place. Othered. You aren't really Mexican. You don't sound Mexican. You talk white. Your skin is too light. Your skin is too dark. Go back where you belong. We speak English in America. We don't want your kind here. Straddling two worlds, two cultures, without a home, a place to belong. Keeping along with the same theme of identity, feeling othered, and just not feeling welcome a lot of times. This next poem really discusses, or really envelops kind of experiences that I had growing up. Both my parents are Hispanic. My father's immigrant from Mexico, and so he never was able to speak in the proper English way. He always had a very thick accent. And that was something that growing up, I had to kind of witness lots of negative comments about. So you'll see one of those experiences here in this poem. Dismantling muros, which in English translates to walls. He leaned forward and smiled earnestly. He tugged my ponytail. He sneered. Your dad is a wetback. The words of a third grader ring out clear in my ears. We build walls, muros, barriers. We keep each other out. We teach the future to embrace hate. Brushing the tears, I stand up. No hashtags. We want action. Break down the walls that divide us. We are more alike than we are different. Thank you. My next poem I actually wrote very recently, I think just a week or so ago. Also just embracing family, culture, and was an experience that happened this past Christmas. This Christmas, my 2-year-old, it was her first year that she could actually take part in a longtime family tradition of making tamales. And so this next poem kind of sprung forth from that experience. Familia. Cold, wet, squishy, slathered up and down on the husk, filled with chili verde, y pollo, y queso. Next, uno más. Repeats over and over, más, until dozens lie before my eyes. Smiling, I look to my mother. She's been working on mixing more masa. I make my next tamale, imagining how delicioso it'll be. I glance down to my daughter, 2. Her long, dark, wavy hair in braids. She sits beside me. Husk in hand, lathering it up with masa. Up and down. Naturally. As if she were born to do this. She rolls the husk up and proudly announces, done. Next one, please. Grabbing another husk, she goes on. So I'm going to read, much like Gina did, I'm going to read a poem that inspired the next 2 poems that I will read that I wrote. So when I was in college, I was introduced to Maya Angelou's writing, and I felt really empowered by it. I read her poem, Still I Rise, first, and it kind of led me to writing the next 2 poems that I'm going to discuss. And I really like the different themes that she embraces. This idea of difficulties with, identity, finding your voice, finding it, but standing on your own feet. So I'm going to read Still I Rise, and then read my poems that were inspired by it. So Still I Rise by Maya Angelou. You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still, like dust, I'll rise. Does my sassiness upset you? Why are you beset with gloom? 'Cause I walk like I've got oil wells pumping in my living room. Just like moons and like suns with the certainty of tides. Just like hope springing high, still I'll rise. Do you want to see me broken? Did you want to see me broken? Bowed head and lowered eyes, shoulders falling down like teardrops, weakened by my soulful cries. Does my haughtiness offend you? Don't you take it awful hard, 'cause I laugh like I've got gold mines digging in my own backyard. You may shoot me with your words. You may cut me with your eyes. You may kill me with your hatefulness, but still, like air, I'll rise. Does my sexiness upset you? Does it come as a surprise that I dance like I've got diamonds at the meeting of my thighs? Out of the huts of history's shame, I rise. Up from a past that's rooted in pain, I rise. I'm a black ocean, leaping and wide. Welling and swelling, I bear in the tide. Leaving behind nights of terror and fear, I rise. Into a daybreak that's wondrously clear, I rise. Bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave, I am the dream and the hope of the slave. I rise. I rise. I rise. This poem in particular, as you can kind of see just by looking at it, me reading it, it's extremely powerful. There's so much within it. And after reading this, I felt inspired, passionate. And these next two poems were kind of born out of these ideas and that kind of inspiration. Some of the main themes that I took from it and wanted to make sure that I tried to discuss in my own way was just this idea of overcoming boundaries, barriers, like my Mortals poem before, pain, but also overcoming that and finding strength in yourself. This next poem is titled Shatterproof. They thought they could silence me. They sternly, severely tortured my body. They believed they broke my soul. They took my voice and beat me. They thought they won. I cannot stop laughing. My body in pieces. They broke me, choked me, and prevented me from speaking, yes, temporarily. Bones repair, and bruises mend. Pain fades, memories last. The lessons they teach linger, everlasting. Strength, resilience, truth. They made me undefeatable. I stand, I persist, I shine. Thank you. Like I mentioned, this other poem also was inspired by some of the concepts in the Still I Rise poem by Maya Angelou. It's titled Victory. Upon the cliff, the wind howls. The rain bites. The ground quivers. So close to falling. Staring straight ahead, I brace myself for the storm. It rattles, shakes, and thrashes me. Despite the pain, I persist. Unsteadily grounded, I pick myself up. Peering around at the ruins left behind, I smile. You cannot defeat me. Despite your strength and magnitude, I stand. There's no storm that can stop me, nothing that can tame me, and no one that can control me. Firmly, with my feet on the ground, I dance. Thank you. For my last poem, I wanted to end kind of with a positive note, because the other ones are kind of dealing with difficult concepts. This last one I wrote was inspired by me just kind of walking around at Sac State as a student, and I took this picture of this gorgeous tree that in the middle of winter was blooming. It was a picture of a Japanese magnolia tree at Sac State. And I think I added a little bit of context in that I was a student, I was overwhelmed. You know, midterms were right in the middle of midterms week. I felt so overwhelmed. I felt like almost throwing in the towel. Juggling, you know, like many of our students do here. I was juggling family life, work. I'm a first generation high school graduate, let alone college graduate. And here I am tackling something that I didn't understand and none of my family understood. I didn't feel like I could go on. So walking around, I saw those trees, and they were just illuminating, breathtaking, and encouraging. And so this next poem was kind of born and sprung from these trees. It's titled Flourishing. Everywhere the trees are empty, the mightiest among them stand solemn and barren. They reek of death. Bound to the wills of weather and man, they've shed their leaves, and many of them have been left behind as stumps. One tree stands out among the huge mass of wood. Along its long, slender branches is nothing. At the tips of the branches, there are large blooms blossoming. Pink and white petals have formed and thrived, each flower rippling, oozing. Here amidst all the gloom and dead, one stands alone, alive and beautiful. And thank you guys so much.
I think you're safe, Gina, because unless Coleridge's family insists otherwise, he's dead and we can pronounce it any way we want to. At this point, for those of you who can remember, I'm going to sort of play Oprah or Phil Donahue, and if you have questions, I'll run up and shove a microphone in your face so everyone can hear it. So questions from those in attendance for our poets. Yeah, we'll take comments too. So Dr. Casper Denman will be first.
How do you find a balance between sharing your emotions in your poetry and encouraging your students to share emotions without it becoming overwhelming?
Okay. Yep. My exercise for the day.
Well, I teach my students about the personal narrative essay. Pretty much in all of my classes, we start with the personal narrative, so it is something that we talk about. I think for most I think just acknowledging that this can be emotional for people, that can bring out personal things that are painful. So the acknowledgement plus also saying, you know, only write or talk about what you're comfortable sharing. So those two pieces always I say. And then, you know, a lot of times people who end up seeing, I don't really want to share this with people, I say, okay, you don't have to. But I've had a lot of students say, you know what, I feel comfortable now, because they get to know each other, and then they feel like, you know, if I only need to share it with this one student or with you, I'm okay. So I think just ultimately, but you know this in your classroom, is just like getting a supportive community in your classroom, and that's really the main thing. But yeah, I share my stuff. I'm trying to share my things, my own personal poems in class, so I think it helps them be vulnerable as well. Thanks, Christina.
Another question, comment. Oh, you're going to use your teacher voice, okay.
And I was going to kind of open up with giving some context as well. I always wrote, actually. Like I think mentioned in my bio, I've always kind of been this born teacher. Growing up, I was the oldest of 4, and in the summer, we would play school, and I would be the teacher, and they'd have homework due. And so, you know, I loved teaching, but that kind of that love, I think, was inspired, impacted by my love for reading and writing. And so I started off writing as kind of a way to escape the barriers of, you know, my neighborhood. I grew up in not the best area. And rather than going and being outside and taking part in whoever knows what might be going on, I stayed inside and wrote. And a lot of the time that was therapeutic. And just kind of, you know, my way of processing and getting words to paper, working through whatever feelings that was going on as a, you know, young teenager. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I really started writing when I was in 4th grade. So, but I think I was more nudged on from classes, you know, so we had to write poetry in class. So I don't remember if I just like, I don't think I was a born teacher. I love that. Yeah, so 4th grade, I just started writing, and, you know, when I was here, Harold Schneider was my teacher, and he was just really inspiring to me. And also there was a counselor here who, you know, I said, I want to be a writer, and I want to go to San Francisco, and I want to go to San Francisco State. And she said, have you heard of UC Davis? They have a great creative writing program there. And I said, oh. And it was kind of like, have you guys seen Lady Bird? Where she said, I don't want to go to UC Davis. And it was like the same exact thing. I don't want to go over there. And it's like, I mean, I did the transfer agreement. I went to UC Davis. I studied with, you know, really great poets there. And yeah, I mean, so really, I'm really home here at ARC, and it's like it all started, you know? Yeah. Other questions, comments, or questions about the poems, or Tracy?
Want the mic?
That's hard because I don't think I wait anymore for the muse to come to me. I used to, and I used to have like, oh, I'm inspired, I'm gonna write this down. Now I have to go and open up my book, my notebook, or the computer, and I have to start there. And so a lot of times I like using concrete images to stand for something. That objective correlative, I think is what it's called. Yeah, so an object standing for something, a metaphor. And so I really try and do that. And then also I learned too that I used to actually be inspired and then be able to write out a whole poem in one sitting like I did with that one last night. But it usually doesn't happen anymore. So I have to just do short snippets. And then my teacher told me at San Diego State, like, you know, a line a day is okay. Well, that sounds bad. A poetry line a day. A poetry line a day is, you know. So if you have one poetry line a day, you're good, you know. And so I kind of let go. And I don't. It's like maybe once every month or something. Yeah.
I think I used to write whenever something really inspired me. And sometimes I do, but I feel like that changed when I became a mother. I have a single mom, and she's almost 3, but very big, you know, attached to mama. So I think for me, I have to steal it, you know, when I'm holding her hand, trying to get her to pass out in her bed and praying that she goes to sleep. And I'm on my phone in Google Docs because something really stood out to me. And I'm utilizing that time. Technology, I think, has really impacted the way that I'm able to at least get something out when I'm feeling like I need to. The other thing is, like, I have a couple of journals that I keep ideally away from the toddler, because she'll take over and start writing for me. Yes, she likes to contribute, but I keep them around, and when there are those big moments where I just have to get something out, I'll tell myself, all right, I need 5 minutes. So I will give myself the 5 minutes to write and just have that space just for me. Yeah, so just squeezing, a lot like Gina, like squeezing it in when you can. A line a day keeps you sane or something, keeps you kind of going. And so for me, that's what I do as well, is a little bits at a time. Yeah.
Yeah, why not? Yeah. Others. Yes, Professor Merson.
How was it sharing a poem that you wrote last night?
I think I was just being vulnerable and just telling, because didn't I, in our class, I shared something? Yes, I did. I started getting into the habit of writing with my students. So if I'm giving them something to write, I'll write as well. And actually, that's actually where I'm getting my writing done, is when my students are writing, and then I said, why don't I write this? And so I have been trying to, in my classrooms already, be vulnerable with them and just say, hey, we're asking them to share with us. We never share with them, and they like it, you know? They like it, and yeah, and I just feel like, usually I can tell, like, if the poem's really, really bad, or, like, I think it's passable. I think it was good enough, you know, so, and I just said, that's why I had that meta commentary where I'm like, you know, shitty first drafts, and I'm going to get feedback now, you know, so. Thank you. Well, thanks. Thanks, yeah, thank you. Yeah, I was a little bit like, that's why I even said it, the whole meta commentary where I'm like, oh, this is kind of precious, you know, it's so like sickly sweet. But then I think my students are gonna like the sentiment, you know, so I just really wanted to be like, thank you. I'll read it to you guys later. Yeah, so.